Welcome back to Tech and Drugs. I'm your host, Thibaut. Today's episode takes a fresh twist. We're still exploring tech's impact on drug discovery and development, but from a legal angle today. With the advent of ChatGPT and LLMs, the question of training data quickly rose to the top. And it's a challenge that applies to any model relying on vast datasets. Who owns the data? Was it obtained fairly? As AI continues to reshape industries, the legal landscape around copyright and IP is evolving rapidly, and we are diving right in. Our guide for this deep dive is Marilia Aires. She's a legal counsel and data protection officer, and now a key member of Kiin AI. With over 16 years of legal experience across national and international clients, Marilia has a knack for translating complex regulations into practical, ethical business strategies. Her passion? Making real-world impact through biotech, data protection, and compliance. A dedicated mentor and continuous learner, she stays at the cutting edge of privacy laws and regulatory standards, all while championing meaningful collaboration across tech, legal, and executive teams. Marilia is the third guest we've hosted from Kiin AI following Filippo and Mark in our first episode. And we are thrilled to have her insight on legal framework shapes the future of AI-driven healthcare. So buckle up for a fascinating conversation about ownership, responsibility, and what it means for the next generation of life savings invention. So enjoy the show, and Marilia, welcome to the show.
Hello, Thibaut. How are you? Delighted to be here and talking with you and share a little bit about me. Thank you for inviting me.
You're welcome. And I think it will be a very interesting topic today because, as I said, we talk often about the technical aspect, the scientific aspect, but obviously nowadays the legal aspect takes the center stage. And I think that there is a lot for all of us, all the listener, all the scientists to learn what really goes in the background and how can we make things happen in a legal and ethical way. So that's what we will learn with you today. Before we deep dive into this topic, I'd like to learn a bit more about you because now you're working. It's very niche. It's the intersection of legal, ethics, data protection, and life science. So I'd love to get a better understanding of your journey. So what brought you to this very interesting intersection of all those very complex topics?
If we go back 20 years ago, when I qualified, I was prepared to be a traditional lawyer, right? But I think my professional journey has always been defined by my ability to adapt and to leverage my knowledge to find solutions for complex challenges. And especially after many years of freelancing, I realized that working with IT, with software, with pharmaceutical industries, healthcare, life science, I started to develop more of these skills. It was not something that I decided from one day to the other. It was something that just appeared in my life. Okay, it was a journey. I would say that after earning my law degree in Portugal and becoming a member of a bar association, I gained a different and invaluable experience across different legal roles, including in-house contract management and even lecturing. I gave classes for many years as well. And it was really my time as freelancer that catalyzed my specialization into the intersection of law, technology, and life science domain. The exposure to the growing significance of digital transformation and the utilization of data and AI in the heavily regulated industries such as finance, banking, pharmaceuticals, and drug discovery made me recognize the imperative of legal professionals that could definitively navigate the evolving regulatory landscape and empower organizations to leverage these transformative technologies in a responsible and compliant way, which we know that is a very difficult thing to achieve. And I think immediately it prompted me to study GDPR, GRC, AI, privacy compliance, and my depth understanding of legal risk profiles, regulatory frameworks, and commercial transactions positioned me as an indispensable asset in helping companies to strike the right balance between innovation and ethical and legal consideration. This was always something that I started to build in a way that was with evolution, nothing planned. Let's say like this.
I think you're right. A lot of if you ask a lot of people in our field, if you ask them, did you think that you will be doing that, 20 years ago? People will say, well, no, because 20 years ago it didn't even exist. So it was difficult to predict that we will do things that are at the intersection of, well, our own specialty. So in your case, legal, in my case, life science, and then technology, AI, et cetera, et cetera. But you mentioned already a few very interesting things, and I'd like to deep dive in that. So you mentioned GDPR and a number of other acronyms. So if we go to this legal framework and data ethics, so data is definitely the backbone of AI. So you can have all the cleverest algorithm. If you don't have data, then they just, you can't train them. The challenge is that the data are often locked behind complex legal frameworks. So can you tell us what are the biggest challenges you faced negotiating access to high-value data sets?
That's a fantastic question, Thibaut. And it's really a critical issue that the intersection between legal frameworks and data ethics is absolutely central to the responsible development of AI technologies, as you mentioned, and especially in high regulated industries like life science. Data is the backbone of AI, and it's the raw material that powers the algorithms, machine learning models, and predictive analytics that are transforming the sector. And as we all know, and as you mentioned, is often locked behind complex legal and regulatory barriers that can pose a significant challenge for the organizations. I tend to describe the laws that are behind data. It's a patchwork of privacy laws, security requirements, ethical guidelines, and taking some healthcare data. For example, you have IPA in the United States, you have GDPR in Europe, you have a whole host of other sector-specific regulations that place strict limitations on how the data can be accessed, stored, utilized, and it's just not a matter of understanding the law, right? It is also a matter of all the important ethical considerations around things like consent, data and algorithm bias that have to be factored in. So one of the challenges that I have encountered is helping clients to navigate these complex landscape. And it often requires a dedicated balancing act. And you will hear me saying this a lot, balance. We have to structure good data sharing agreements, but at the same time, implement robust governance frameworks as well, and ensure that the appropriate safeguards are in place while we are still preserving the transformative potential of technology. It's a fine balance here. So in terms of negotiation as well, for example, when you are negotiating with the other party, client, suppliers, be honest and transparent and say what you have in place and what you can do.
If we were to look specifically at some of those regulation, because in the past couple of years, I think, as I used to work as a product manager, working on the digital products that will use data, and obviously we will have client data. So I think the first legal framework that I came across was the GDPR. Now, as we are talking about AI, there is the European AI Act. And so Europe, especially Europe, came up with a number of regulation that are there for a good reason. But obviously, there are always two sides, and you talk about balance. There is on one hand the regulation, which is there to protect people, to protect their data, and then on the other hand, you have innovation. And you often have this criticism coming from entrepreneurs saying, "Oh, all those regulation means that we cannot innovate." I don't think it's true. I have worked in innovation, so I always think that there are ways around, and that we can partner with legal teams to make sure that we understand the regulatory framework and that we can navigate it and then still innovate. I'd love to have your perspective on on the GDPR, on the EU AI Act, and what it means for for company like yours, for instance, that are innovating but that still have to take into consideration those constraints.
Okay, I totally agree. It's one of the central challenge that we have is to combine all the legal framework that we have and still continue to innovate. For example, the interplay between data protection laws like GDPR and emerging regulations like the AI Act, and the transformation, the potential of AI in drug discovery and development of systems creates a complex and sometimes ambiguous landscape for organizations to navigate. GDPR comes with data and other privacy frameworks, comes with putting in place incredible safeguards when it comes to data collection, data processing, storage of personal information, things like obtaining explicit consent, implementing data pools, data impact assessments, and the EU AI Act, with focus in high-risk AI applications, introduce an additional layer of regulatory oversight and compliance requirements that organizations have to deal with. Provisions around transparency, human oversight, bias mitigation, some ambiguities and tensions that arise are even, let's say, more sensitive when we are talking about health or genomic data in AI-powered drug discovery or clinical application. For example, the legislation carve out some exceptions for research and scientific purpose as well, but the boundaries are still murky. There is always a risk of unintended consequences or overly restrictive interpretation. So in terms of balancing compliance and innovation, my approach has been always working closely with the clients and with the engineers. You need to understand what your engineers are doing, what your client or the organization that you are working for wants, and develop a comprehensive data strategy to address both legal and regulatory requirements, and also the practical needs of the business. These often involve things like conducting detailed data mapping and risk assessments to understand the full scope of data sets and their sensitivity. Also implementing data provenance and lineage tracking mechanisms as well, designing flexible and consent-based data access and usage protocols as well, engaging with regulators and stakeholders to help to shape our policies. This is all new. Also, as we have been saying until now, this is all new, even for the regulators. I remember that I went to a roundtable with ICO a few months ago, and I was discussing with them, we need more collaborative approach with the regulator, because most of the times we don't have this kind of approach, and we don't collaborate exactly with our regulators because we have fear of enforcement. And the problem is that the unknown is, so we need to work together with them. At least we are challenging the situation together with regulators. And finally, I would say embedding ethical AI principles in practice into the core of the technology development lifecycle is very important. Create a life cycle and make sure you are always reviewing it and working with that, so you can understand what is being done with your engineers, with the organization, and with the people that you are working. Work with your stakeholders. That's the most important thing. I think it's a delicate and constant evolving process. But at the same time, I believe that with the right knowledge, expertise, innovative mindset, and the commitment to responsible data, we can transform this industry.
You mentioned working with a regulator. When the EU AI Act was published, as you said, there were different categories, and I think most of the applications that were linked to pharma and healthcare were classified as a high risk. And I remember at that time there are a number of pharmaceutical associations that try to argue that the model that are used in pharma R&D should not be classified as high risk. You made another point that was interesting, that things are not black and white. How do you navigate this? As someone who's not a lawyer, sometimes we think, okay, law is law, and something is written, and then there is no interpretation, which actually is not the case. It's a lot of it requires careful interpretation of what is written, and sometimes even challenging what the regulators are saying. So can you explain a bit what is the role in a constantly evolving new landscape? What is the role that a legal professional like you are playing to help?
I am always juggling between innovation, law, and business interest. So that's why I always like to use balance and equilibrium. It's always the most important thing here. And as lawyers, we have this capability for interpretation of the law, for a constant evolving of the nature of the law. Many years ago, when I was studying law, one of my most important learnings was that law must reflect the society, right? If we have a good track of what we are doing, if we are transparent, and this is the most important thing, as I said, conducting detailed data mapping, having always a track and keeping evidence of what made your decision and what was your interpretation of the law. And if you are not sure, go to the regulator, ask the regulator. For example, I think that the sandbox that, for example, the ICO has, also in Europe, sandbox regarding the AI Act as well, are very important places to go for companies to have help. For example, in the UK, ICO provides guidance to organizations. They have specific consultations, and you are not at risk by not knowing and asking. And if you follow their guidance, you are covered. If you can show the evidence that you are willing to do the right thing and that you did everything that was at your knowledge that day to solve the problem, I'm not going to say that you are 100% safe, but at least you show goodwill in solving the problem.
AI is transforming every profession at the moment, so including law. Many topics are new and not necessarily easy to understand. How do you, as a lawyer, keep up with understanding all those concepts? Because all those concepts are very complex. I think they are complex for people who are in the domain of AI, for people who are actually using the AI for their work. Because as I said before, we didn't train on that at school. So now we are all users of AI, and it's very challenging to keep up to date with all the, not only the legal aspect, but the technical aspect, because the technical aspect in many ways will inform how do you use the product, but also will inform how, as a lawyer, you need to understand what can be done, what cannot be done, what is actually happening.
Let me start from one side. I totally agree that with the rapid pace of technological advancement, particularly in areas like AI, is definitively transforming every industry, every profession, including the legal field, is being transformed in a way that I think the role of legal experts is going to become increasingly crucial in organization to help with the complexities and implications of new technologies. By nature, I think that the role is going to evolve and need to keep pace with the changes. As you were also saying, we need to keep pace with these changes. In the past, the view of a traditional lawyer was often reactive, risk-averse, gatekeeper, someone who would interpret laws and regulations, identify potential liabilities, these kind of things. To some extent, that core function is still important. However, I think that the most successful legal professionals of the future are going to take on a much more proactive and strategic and collaborative role. They will need to shape and guiding, and also they will have at the same time to learn how to use it. This will require deep understanding of the underlying science and engineering behind tools like AI, machine learning, data analytics. So legal experts will need to be fluent in technical jargon, but also the potential use case of these new technologies. We need to be more innovative as well, creative. And this is where we will make the difference, because AI can draft contract for you, and you will need to be the one that understand. Of course, we need the base, the deep knowledge, but you will be able to review that contract. You will be able to create a fast-paced environment as well. And for me, I also try to learn a lot about AI, for example, and software, and I even try to learn how to code, because I really needed to understand what was happening behind the scenes.
Do you believe that coding, to some extent, should become part of a curriculum of a lawyer?
I wouldn't go so far, right? I wouldn't make necessarily it mandatory and part of legal education, but I think that having a deeper understanding how these technologies work, and if they work in this field, right? And it can be incredible beneficial for lawyers. For example, the ability to speak the language of data, algorithms, softwares, engineer can help lawyers to collaborate more effectively with cross-functional teams, engineers, data scientists, and domain experts. And apart from this, I also recognize that the core curriculum of a law school is already dense and demanding. If we go to every aspiring lawyer to gain proficiency in coding, programming, or other technical skills, it's a burden for the students. And I think the primary focus should be the legal part. But we have also a strong case to incorporate more general exposure to technology. For example, dedicated guests, course, lectures, case studies to help the students to understand the broader implications and applications of the technology. I have some books that I started to lay to AI for lawyers. This is an interesting book to start. It's not a bulky one, for example. And I also recommend for the people that are working on these areas, cloud computing law as well, the tech contracts handbook as well, and one that is more for fun, tomorrow's lawyers. It is more for you to read and open your mind, because the core skills you have it already.
When we were preparing for this call, you were mentioning data contracts and how it changed the way company handle collaborative AI project. Can you elaborate a little bit on what is it and what are the data contracts and what are their impact on AI projects?
The term data contract does not align with the contract in a legal sense, right? And you know this better than me. It's a mutual agreement between two parties. A data contract specifies the provided data set and is owned by one party, typically the data provider. The term data contract can be somewhat misleading for us legal, but what really is a data contract is how the data is used in practice. So the data contract serves as a critical blueprint for how data is shared, utilized, especially in complex collaborative environments where multiple parties and systems are involved. It helps to establish a common understanding of the data structure, data quality, requirements, access, permissions, users guidelines, ensuring that everyone is working toward the same goals. For example, I learned this while trying to integrate some tools that I was using via APIs or whatever. Because for me, when I was talking about data contract, for me, I was thinking about the data usage agreement, right? It's a different type of contracts. This is a level of formalized data governance that is especially crucial in the context of AI projects, where the data is foundational raw material that powers algorithms, models, and insights. Without a clear contractual framework in place, there is a much higher risk of misunderstandings, data integrity issues, and compliance challenges that could undermine the entire project. The specific elements are data schema, data quality requirements, access control, change management process, users guidelines. Data contracts are particularly important in environments like architecture, cross-functional data sharing, multi-stakeholders AI projects.
Now, if you see a lot of AI companies that made the headline over the past 2 years, starting with OpenAI. Now, most recently, we had this Chinese company with their model DeepSeek. So you have a lot of new models that feed on very large amount of data, and there was also a lot of legal question around how they obtain the data and whether the way they use the data was where they did it following guidelines. And I think most people agree that they didn't. But I think the question I have for you here is that going back to this balance between legal innovation and that things are never black or white. So if you look at some of these big models that were trained on using lots of data from on the internet, how can a company like that operate and create those very, very large products that takes data from literally thousands or hundreds of thousands of providers while still respecting the law, or maybe they don't, but then they have to manage the consequences of not respecting the law. Do you see what I mean? So I'd like to understand, from a legal person perspective, because I'm sure that a lot of those companies, they also have a legal person in their team who must tell them, look, what you're doing, there is a risk. So are you okay with this risk or not? Because you might not respect all the laws in all the state and in all the jurisdiction where you're taking the data.
That's a really important question and complex one. Okay. Ensuring the ethical use of data while maintaining the rapid pace of innovation required to break through to discoveries, to be upfront in the competition, is going to be certainly a delicate balancing act. Again, okay? For example, in the life science sector, we are under immense pressure to accelerate the development of new treatments, diagnostics, therapies that can save and improve lives, right? Potential of data-driven technologies like AI and machine learning are proving to dramatically streamline and optimize their R&D process that is very complex. As being able to quickly analyze massive data sets and uncover novel insights and simulate complex biological systems has the power to radically transform the pace of innovation. Most of the time, I would say that we are dealing with some of the most sensitive data in man, with highly personal health information, clinical trial results, and more. There is a profound ethical, legal, and regulatory considerations around how data is collected, stored, shared, and utilized. Breaching privacy, compromising data integrity, or misusing this information could have devastating impacts on individuals and public health. So I would always say that the key lines is taking a truly proactive, holistic, and collaborative approach to data governance and ethical AI development. I would say it's not just enough. And in terms of compliance and risk mitigation, we need to make sure that data governance and ethical AI are the principles and the safeguards that are embedded in the innovation life cycle since the beginning. Regarding this means that you need to establish robust data contracts, usage agreements that clearly define rights, responsibilities, and expectations. And expectations is also a key word. You need to manage the expectation. The expectation of the data subject, the expectation of the public, and these expectations around data sharing and the utilization of this data requires also implementing rigorous data provenance tracking, anonymization techniques, and access control protocols, and crucially, has necessarily to bring together cross-functional teams, legal experts, data scientists, ethicists, and domain experts to co-create the frameworks and processes that can enable a responsible innovation. And I think the life science sector has a profound moral obligation to get this right.
Do you believe that public interest could outweigh, in some case, strict data restrictions?
That's a fascinating and highly complex question that gets to the heart of some profound ethical dilemma around data usage and individual rights privacy. It's kind of a challenge that requires a careful, nuanced deliberation. There are valid arguments and important considerations on both sides. One hand, the principle of individual data privacy and my bodily autonomy is a human right that we must be extremely cautious about infringing that right? To infringe that, let's go to COVID, for example. We were infringing data privacy rights because we were facing a pressing public health emergency. But the risk of setting precedents on civil liberties, on our fundamental rights, is very real. And there is a valid concern because once, let's use the expression, once the genie is out of the bottle, it's very difficult to put it back. And that's why we had very, very engaging and very, very on social media, on TVs and newspapers, we were discussing the use of apps that track you, where you are, what you are doing. While if you had COVID, and for example, everyone was downloading the app, if my neighbor has COVID, and this is one problem, and we all understand the benefits, because the benefits of leveraging data in service of a greater good, especially during crises like pandemics or in a fight against rare diseases, is the benefits are tremendous, and we know this. The ability to rapidly analyze population level data, uncover critical insights, and coordinate a swift can create a targeted response that could save millions of lives. So it's, how do I say this? It's a classical case of individual versus the collective. And determining where exactly the line should be drawn is an enormously complex challenge and with no easy answers. My view is that certainly high specific, time limited, and tightly controlled circumstances, we can have a carefully considered, transparently implemented relaxation of strict data restrictions. What do I mean by this? Is I agree that we can lower the bar for privacy if it's time bound. It's very well considered before, and we control the circumstances. But at the same time, we are transparent to the data subject, and we say why, when, and how. It's very important to communicate. But of course, we need to do this with most care, with utmost care, and with robust safeguards to oversight the mechanisms that are in place. I believe that the bar could be set, and I also set it very high, because the potential upsides are too profound to be dismissed. So we need to think about it very carefully.
That's a fascinating topic, and I think we could talk about that for an hour or more. But let's look a bit into the future now. So with all this evolution around how we consider data, the usage of data, AI, et cetera, what are the key trends that you foresee in the biotech industry over the next couple of years, really related to data, usage of data in the context of tech?
I think we are going to see rapid advancements in AI-powered drug discovery. We are going to see personalized medicine coming as a trend as well. I hope to see that we are going to see an increased emphasis on responsible data governance, patient privacy, and ethical AI development as well. And we are going to see a growing integration into the real world data. And for example, with our smartwatches, with our phones, it's going to be something that is going to help with what I said before, personalized medicine, because this is a way of gathering data of the individual. So it's going to change, it's going to drive R&D. That's what I think as well. And we are going to see more need for interdisciplinary collaboration between biotech, tech, and regulatory and legal experts. That's what I think as well.
Okay. So now last one for today. If there is one aspect of how data is managed or regulated today that you could change with your magic wand, so what is it that you will change?
Okay, I will establish a more unified and globally coordinated approach to data governance framework. That's what I would change, because currently the landscape is fragmented. It's a patchwork, as I said before, that is a patchwork of regional, national regulations that can be, and it's a burden. They are burdensome for organization. Organizations have difficulties to navigate these rules around data collection, usage, cross-border sharing is also a problem. So the key benefit of this change is providing a clear, predictable, and streamlined compliance environment for business and research, while we are at the same time managing the expectations and protecting robustly the data subjects, and would unlock a free flow of information needed to drive breakthrough innovations and ensure that these are created in a foundation of trust and responsible stewardship.
Thank you so much for all the insight on this complex and extremely important topic nowadays. Yeah, I'm sure people will learn a lot, and we might send you a lot of follow-up questions.
Thank you very much for having me, Thibaut.